Spring. Father-in-law. I think it's time for the wedding now. Every time I bring up the fact that I'm getting older and maybe it's time to proceed with the wedding, the response is always the same. You rascal. A wedding? You need to wait until you grow up more. When he says grow up more, he's not referring to me, but to the height of my future wife, Jumsoon. I've been here, working hard for 3 years and 7 months without receiving a single penny. Despite all my labor, she hasn't grown tall enough yet. I don't know when she will grow. Damn it. If it were a matter of working harder or worrying about eating too much, I'd have plenty to say. But since Jumsoon is still young, there's just no way around the fact that she needs more time to grow. It made me realize that the whole arrangement was flawed from the start. You set a time frame and you stick to it. But saying, we'll have the ceremony when she grows, who knows when she'll actually grow? I used to think people just keep getting taller, but who knew some just grow wider without gaining height? So I've been silently agreeing, hoping that father-in-law would eventually come around and say, oh, you've worked hard, it's time to get married, hand over the household and all would be good. But instead of sensible talk, there's just nagging and fussing. The thought of being called a son-in-law sounds dull enough, but this whole situation is just ridiculous. Oblivious to it all, I've been waiting for Jumsoon to grow taller like a fool. Feeling suffocated at times, I've even considered grabbing a ruler and measuring her height. But since father-in-law insists that unmarried men and women shouldn't be in the same place together, there's no way to have a word with her face to face. Whenever we happen to meet at the well, I'd barely glance at her and measure her height with a squint. Each time I'd mutter to myself, damn it, still short, then spit on the ground. No matter how much I exaggerate, her height is just about level with my armpit, though I'm a bit taller than most. Dogs and pigs grow so quickly, so why do humans grow so slowly? I pondered over this for a while. Maybe it's because she keeps lifting the water bucket above her head, stunting her growth, I thought. So I volunteered to carry the water instead. Not only that, when I went to fetch wood, I'd place a stone on the shrine for the village guardian and say, please make Jumsoon taller. If she grows, I'll bring rice cakes in return. I've said this more than once or twice, but despite all these efforts, it's still fruitless. It's clear that the argument I had the other day wasn't because I dislike father-in-law. When I was planting rice, I thought quietly to myself how absurd this situation is. Even if this rice grows and Jumsoon eats it and she grows a bit, it's still not enough. What am I doing planting this? I have no desire at all to strain myself just to fill up father-in-law's belly every year. Doesn't he realize he eats too much with his pot belly? Goodness, my stomach. Still massaging my belly, I crawled up to the edge of the field. Then I let the bundle of rice I had carried on my shoulder drop to the ground with a thud and sat down myself. No matter how busy I am, if my stomach hurts, that's enough to stop me. Who can work when they're in pain? I plucked a bunch of lush grass and gently rubbed my legs while glancing at father-in-law's face. Father-in-law, with a strange look in his eyes, stared at me for a while and then asked, "What's wrong with you now?" "My stomach hurts," I replied, slumping onto the grass. Father-in-law's demeanor changed instantly. He came up from the field, grabbed my collar, and began slapping my cheeks. "You rascal. Do you think you can mess around like this without consequences? How dare you slack off?" When our father-in-law gets angry, his behavior becomes truly unpleasant. Where can you find a father-in-law who constantly insults his son-in-law like this? It's said that there's not a single person in our village who doesn't get scolded by him. Even the little children call him Scolding Phil behind his back. His real name is Bong Phil. However, if he truly loses the favor of the people, it's a greater fault than just insults. It's because he is the landlord's tenant manager. Usually, when someone is a tenant manager, he is good at insulting others, hitting people, or just has an unpleasant appearance. My father-in-law fits all these descriptions perfectly. If a tenant doesn't send even a chicken to his house or doesn't help with his field work, by the next autumn, the land they farm diminishes significantly. Then, those who had been buttering him up with money and alcohol end up grabbing the land slyly. As a result, A big bull naturally strolls into father-in-law's barn, and although the villagers endure his insults, they still bend over to accommodate him. However, father-in-law doesn't dare raise his voice to me. Without a second thought, he slapped my cheek firmly, leaving him speechless as he silently swallowed his own spit. I know him inside out. I should be cutting reeds and planting rice soon, especially during this busy season. If I just go home without working, it won't be good for him. Last year around this time, I begged him a bit to arrange my marriage, but he threw a stone at me for oversleeping, spraining the ankle of the sleeper. I whimpered and whined for days, but in the end, didn't he turn into a half-crying mess? Yes. Get up and do some work. If the rice grows well this year, you might finally get married next fall. With my ears tingling, I promptly rose that day. While it took others 2 days to prepare the field, I managed to finish it alone. Father-in-law was visibly surprised, his eyes widening in disbelief. Wouldn't it be fitting for him to arrange my marriage when autumn arrives? However, as he stacked firewood, he made no mention of it. Instead, he simply pointed at Jumsoon, who was carrying the water bucket, and remarked, "She still has to grow up before considering marriage." That was all. In my anger, I was tempted to just say, "Eat this, you father-in-law," and throw him into the ground, then run away back to our hometown. But I bit my tongue and refrained from saying anything. Honestly, I can't bear the thought of returning home like this. The embarrassment of being chased away after coming here to get married would be unbearable. I rose from the edge of the field and approached my father-in-law, who sat there in silence. "All right, I'm leaving. Please pay me for the work I've done." "You came here to be a son-in-law, not a servant, didn't you?" "If that's the case, then you should arrange the wedding ceremony. You've been promising to marry her off, but it's all talk and no action." "Well, am I the one not doing it?" "She's not grown up yet," he says, calmly puffing on his pipe and repeating the same old excuse. When it comes to this sort of discussion, I always end up being the one at a loss. This time, I've decided it won't happen again. I will go straight to the village chief with my father-in-law and ask him to make a decision for us. "Ah, why are you acting like this towards your father-in-law?" Even though he protests and argues that he won't go, ultimately, he can't resist my strength. He just keeps bossing me around, not giving his daughter to me. What's with all this stubbornness? But the truth is, I don't resent my father-in-law because of that. The day before, wasn't I out working on the new ridge field alone? Every time I went to the field, a strange floral scent tickled my nose, and bees buzzed occasionally overhead. In the secluded valley, where only the sound of spring water is heard from between the rocks, the warm spring sun feels like a blanket, and it's almost dreamlike. I felt sluggish and feverish, though I don't know what illness it is yet. My chest fluttered, and I was like this. As I sang a song while herding a bull, my shoulders usually swayed rhythmically. But for some reason, I didn't feel like plowing the field at all. My whole body was relaxed, and I kept feeling annoyed. I was just aimlessly herding the bull. "Anya! Anya! This darned bull," because it's my father-in-law's. "I'm gonna hit you." But my inner frustration wasn't really because of Anya. It was because I saw Jumsoon's height while carrying lunch. Jumsoon isn't exactly a beautiful girl. She's not ugly either, but her face is just slightly plain, just enough to be considered a suitable wife for me. She's only 16 this year, but her body is 2 years behind compared to others. Others may grow tall and lean, but her figure is as round as a Korean melon. Her eyes, round and large, are quite pleasing, and though they might look a bit tired, her mouth is perfect for eating rice. Oh, if only she could eat a lot of rice to fill herself out. But one issue is that sometimes she stumbles quite a lot, so while carrying rice, she often slips and falls in the grass field, getting covered in mud. If I don't eat it, she might feel anxious, so when I chew it, it's hard to tell if I'm eating rocks or rice. However, on this day, she delicately placed the rice bowl at the edge of the field. Then, as her father instructed us not to be together, she sat a bit away, facing this way, crouching down and waiting for me to finish. When I finished eating and started to pick up the dishes, wasn't I surprised? With her head bowed and hands holding the bowl tightly, was she asking me to listen to her, or was she expressing her thoughts alone? "Is he going to just work day and night?" she murmured to herself. While I was puzzled by what she meant, I couldn't help but wonder if there was any good solution. So I muttered to myself, "What should I do then?" I asked. After hearing my proposal, she replied sharply, "He should ask my father to arrange the marriage." Her face turned red with determination, and she simply ran off into the mountains. I stood there, staring blankly at her retreating figure, unsure of how to interpret her reaction. As spring approaches, plants begin to thrive with water flowing and new shoots sprouting. It's not unusual for people to grow quickly too, and watching Jumsoon grow so fast in just a few days was truly heartwarming. They say she's still young and full of promise. When we went to see the village chief, he was busy feeding the pigs outside his thatched fence. After returning from Seoul, he had grown his beard into a pointed shape on both sides like a swallow's tail. He had a habit of touching his beard while clearing his throat, always emphasizing that people should behave decently. As he glanced at us, he seemed to already know why we had come. "Why all this fuss?" he asked, clearing his throat again. "Chief, about the contract with my father-in-law." I rushed forward, pushing my father-in-law aside, and quickly corrected myself, no, with my Bingjangnim. I remembered that my father-in-law prefers to be addressed as Bingjangnim. Calling him father-in-law outside might offend him, and it's embarrassing to call him that in public. Despite constant reminders to be cautious, I keep forgetting these things. I only realized because he kept pressing his foot against mine and giving me sideways glances. Even the village chief seemed to sympathize with me as he listened to my story intently. But then again, it's not surprising for anyone to react that way. He scratched his nose with his long-grown fingernail and snorted sharply. "Well then, Bong Pil, quickly arrange the marriage as he wants it so desperately," he said, just as I had suspected. But at these words, my father-in-law shot him a sharp look. "Ah, arranging a marriage already? Shouldn't the girl grow a bit more?" the chief added, frowning and showing little interest other than in his appetite. "Well, that's true," my father-in-law agreed. "Yeah, she hasn't grown in the past 4 years. I don't think she'll grow now," I said. "Just pay me for the work I've done." "Well, son, did I tell her not to grow? Why do you keep saying that to me?" my father-in-law retorted. "How could my Bingmonim, mother-in-law, give birth to Jumsoon when she is just as tall as a sparrow? Actually, her mother is smaller than Jumsoon by about 2 inches. Upon hearing this, my father-in-law chuckled, though it felt like he was chewing on gravel, and pretended to sniffle while subtly nudging me with his elbow, hitting my ribs. Disgusted, I pretended to chase a fly on my calf and bent my waist to push off his butt with mine. My father-in-law, leaning forward as if about to collapse, straightened up abruptly, shooting me a sharp glare. He stood there in front of others, unable to express his frustration with his son-in-law. However, apart from this uncomfortable exchange, we returned to the fields without gaining any further understanding. That was because my father-in-law whispered something in the chief's ear, and then the chief gestured for me to follow him quietly. He then explained the situation in a hushed tone. Some say it was to gain 1/2 an acre more of land from my father-in-law, but I don't think so. "Your words make sense, and it's true that you are eager since you are of age. However, neglecting work during the busy farming season or running away from home will result in significant losses, even imprisonment." Here, I suddenly came to my senses. Why didn't you see the imprisonment for setting fire to the mountain before? Even if it's your own mountain, setting fire to it still leads to imprisonment. How much more serious is it to abandon someone else's crops? Furthermore, about the marriage, there's a legal age for marriage, and one must be 21 to marry. Although you may worry about your children, Jumsoon is only 16 now. But considering what your Bingjangnim said, he will arrange the marriage when the time is right. That should be appreciated. Go quickly and finish what needs to be done without making any fuss. Hurry and don't delay. So, without any complaints, I've worked diligently until this morning. Looking back now, the argument between my father-in-law and me was completely unexpected. From my father-in-law's perspective, he's been acting a bit high and mighty lately, saying things like, "If you have money, you're a gentleman. Do you have anything special?" He deliberately protrudes his lower abdomen and walks with a swagger, but he's not the kind of adult who ruins a family that has cultivated someone else's land. Moreover, if it's about me, I should be careful and marry Jumsoon quickly. Saying this, it was particularly unfortunate that I went to Mung Tae's house last night. It seems like Mung Tae somehow found out about the argument between my father-in-law and me in front of the village chief during the day, and he keeps grumbling about it. All right, so what should we do about it? What else can we do? Hey, why don't you throw Bongpil into the field? He got angry for no reason, started punching the air, and even hit the lantern. He talks big, but then starts demanding money for the oil. I was so stunned that I just sat there silently while he kept on blabbering. Are you planning to just work day and night for him? Youngdok only worked for 1 year and got married, and yet you've worked for 4, and now what? Working more? Do you know that you are the third son-in-law? The third son-in-law. It's frustrating even to talk about it. You should consider a different path. Later, he even scolded me recklessly like his own son. While I can't reproduce every detail of the conversation, the gist of it goes like this. Our father-in-law has 3 daughters, and the eldest got married last autumn. She didn't exactly get married, but rather was sent off with her husband. However, for 10 years, starting from when she was 10 years old, there have been 14 prospective sons-in-law, which is way too many. Since our father-in-law has no sons and only daughters, he must choose a son-in-law carefully until the next daughter is married off. Of course, having a servant would be ideal, but that costs money, so he had to choose someone who was good at work. However, he keeps letting go of those who are bad at work, and they also quit because of the scolding and so on. As for me, I ended up becoming the third son-in-law for Jumsoon. I'm performing my duties well and treating people decently, so my father-in-law sees me as somewhat resourceful and keeps a tight hold on me. The third daughter is only 6 years old now and won't be marrying for another 10 years, so I'll have to endure being treated poorly until then. Therefore, I need to gather my thoughts and get married by any means necessary. That's the situation. I pretended to listen attentively, nodding and making agreeing sounds. Mung Tae lost the land he borrowed due to Bongpil, and he openly grumbled to my father-in-law. If only he had willingly given him that hat, an old one belonging to the governor in its days, a bit tattered on the side but still usable, there would have been no reason to lose the land. But I didn't completely believe Bongpil's words. If I had, wouldn't I have returned last night and fought with my father-in-law? It wouldn't have ended well. As I sat waiting for Jumsoon to bring out breakfast, frankly, I couldn't help but wonder how much rice I'll have for the day. On the table, there was a pot of fermented bean paste stew, a serving of soy sauce, a bowl of plain rice, and a generous dish of mountain vegetables piled high. Jumsoon often brought the mountain vegetables, so there were usually 2 or 4 dishes of them available for consumption, but I couldn't have more than 1 bowl of rice, as my father-in-law had instructed. As Jumsoon set the table in front of me, she muttered, "Just came back from visiting the chief without any result." Huh? Her tone was as confrontational as the other day. I felt a bit foolish for not confronting him more firmly, as I turned my gaze towards the wall and replied, "He said that I can't marry yet. Then what am I supposed to do? Just talk to him properly or do whatever you need to do." She snapped again, her face flushing as she stormed back inside. If anyone had seen me then, I would have looked as pathetic as a chick that lost its mom. Honestly, at that moment, I don't know if there was another sad event. It's tough to bear if my future wife Jumsoon considers me a fool no matter how others may think of me. After eating, as I prepared to head to work carrying a load, I hesitated and ended up throwing it away, lying down on the empty courtyard instead. I felt it would be better to find a solution than endure such humiliation. If I don't work, my father-in-law, being old, won't be able to farm. As I swallowed my resentment, I walked out of the main gate. My father-in-law saw me and asked, "Why are you behaving like this again?" "I'm feeling uncomfortable in my stomach. Ouch!" What kind of nonsense is this after a good meal? If you abandon someone else's farm, you'll end up in prison. Fine. I don't care. Oh dear. Honestly, I thought it wouldn't matter if I ended up in jail for not working. Even if I had a son later, he'd probably call me a fool to my face. Today, I wanted to take a decisive stand. When my father-in-law told me to get up, I didn't move, which made him furious. He stormed off, grabbed a hoe handle, and came back. He started hitting me with it. Every time it struck my side, it hurt terribly. Still, I didn't get up. Then he jabbed my side with the handle and kicked me. My father-in-law was naturally aggressive, but I wasn't one to back down either. I kept my eyes tightly shut against the pain, enduring it as if it were a game. But when he aimed a blow at my face, I suddenly stood up and grabbed his beard. It wasn't just the pain that drove me. It was because I knew Jumsoon had been secretly watching us through a hole in the wall. It's bad enough being seen as someone who can't even utter a word, but being silently chastised by my father-in-law in front of Jumsoon, that would make me look like a complete fool. While I truly wanted to fight back, considering the delicate nature of my relationship with Jumsoon, I held back and just gripped his beard. If Jumsoon knew I was standing up to her father, maybe she would have been pleased. Enraged, my father-in-law seized the hoe handle again and brought it down on my shoulder as if I were nothing. My head spun, and as I regained my composure, anger surged through me. I grabbed his collar and shoved him down the slope, sending him tumbling into the nearby bean patch. "Why do you keep making me work tirelessly without allowing me to marry your daughter?" I shouted at him. I thought I might feel some relief if my father-in-law agreed to let me marry Jumsoon, whether tomorrow or any day. If only he had, I might have let it go. Since I didn't strike him outright, I wouldn't be blamed later, and I could act as I wished. At that moment, my father-in-law scrambled up and tried to grab hold of me. I cried out, feeling as if the world was spinning around me. "Bing Jang Nim! Bing Jang Nim! Bing Jang Nim! Grandfather! Grandfather! Grandfather!" "What do you say? Take this, you scoundrel! Ah, Grandpa, please spare me!" I cried out, flailing helplessly, feeling like I was about to faint. My father-in-law didn't relent. It was overwhelming and painful. Is this what a father-in-law is supposed to be like? I struggled to get up for a long time, feeling dizzy and weak. However, when I raised my head, barely able to see, I managed to crawl over and grabbed his collar again. It was because of these confrontations. They are the reasons that my head was repeatedly struck. Maybe these are the only good things about him. Most people would have immediately thrown me out, but instead he personally wiped the blood off my head with a cloth, put some cotton in my pocket, and said, "Next time, I'll make sure you marry Jumsoon. Now go quickly and plow the field." Who else would pat your back and encourage you like this? I was so grateful to my father-in-law that I even shed tears. Leaving Jumsoon behind, I was on the verge of being kicked out, but unexpectedly I heard him say, "Bing Jongnim, I won't do this again." Swearing this oath, I quickly picked up my hoe and headed to the fields. However, not knowing any better, I thought of my father-in-law as my adversary and pulled him even harder. "Ah, let go of me!" My father-in-law shouted as he struggled. Why would I let him go? Thinking I might as well make a big fuss, I stubbornly continued to struggle. But when my father-in-law fell to the ground and tears welled up in his eyes, I got scared. "Grandpa, let go, please." Even then, "Hey, Jumsoon!" My father-in-law's wife and Jumsoon came running out in panic. I expected that, being his wife, my mother-in-law might intervene on his behalf. But Jumsoon? Surely, she would take my side and secretly support me. What was happening? Despite encouraging me earlier to stand up to her father, now she ran over. "What? This scoundrel is hurting my father," she cried, pulling me away. That's all she did. As I lost my energy, I became a limp figure. Even my mother-in-law joined in, holding me back and crying too. Having immobilized me like this, my father-in-law raised the hoe and struck me with it again. Despite everything, I couldn't help but stare at the incomprehensible expression on Jumsoon's face. "You insolent brat, did you make me call you grandfather? From your father-in-law's mouth?"